Welcome to the fourth installment of EnergyLink's Women in Sustainability Conversations with Modern Industry Leaders. This is taking place in honor of Women's History Month, and my name is Natalie Gregus. I'm the Communications and Public Relations here at EnergyLink. Today, I'm speaking with Barbara Buffaloe, who is currently running for mayor of Columbia, Missouri. And before that, she spent 11 years as Columbia's first sustainability manager. So thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
hmm And to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background?
Yeah. So, as you said, my name is Barbara Buffaloe, and up until May of 2021, I had been this is first sustainability manager for the city of Columbia, Missouri. So, began that job in 2010. It started like many sustainability offices with stimulus funds, where we were looking at ways to save energy in city facilities, and then grew into more like um, how do we help with like a just transition within neighborhoods for as we think about the future, what does sustainability mean? So we were able to do a variety of things in the office. Before that, I worked for the University of Missouri in their extension program. So extension land grant universities have a mission to go out into all parts of the state to help take the information being researched at the university and have local, Missourians be able to embrace it. So I really
hmm
loved doing that. I was also doing my graduate work at the same time for part of it. So I got to research what make people seek out like energy efficiency and conservation behaviors. Um, that's where we found, like obviously cost is of an interest, and then
Right.
comfort. People are interested in wanting to be comfortable at home. And then one thing that probably is what led me to work for the government was that people kind of just assumed that the government was going to require it or take, you know what I mean? Just basically
hmm
make us do it. And so that was kind of like a lot of my background to get me where I was. And then like educationally, I'd done my undergraduate and graduate work at the University of Missouri, thought I wanted to be an architect. And so we then realized I was a good designer, but I was a better kind of influencer to get people to think about the role our built environment plays on creating community and its impact on the planet. So
Yeah.
it's just like a quick little snapshot of where I come from.
Yeah. Well, I'm also a Mizzou grad, so it's also it's
Awesome.
always good to meet another one. But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely think that I was part of the population that kind of assumed, especially before working at EnergyLink, that the government was just kind of gonna have all these things handled for us. And it's
Right.
really cool that you kind of set a precedent for women's leadership in the sustainability office and kind of got that up and running. So can you talk a little bit about some of the highlights from that part of your career, like your climate action and adaptation plan and any other highlights?
Yeah. So, first it started off small with just doing energy efficiency projects in city facilities. And I'll tell you, one of the feedback I heard recently from somebody was like, well, gosh, I wish you had done more. And I think I kind of want to address like one of your later questions. But when I started in my job, sustainability management, Office of Sustainabilities were not common, right? It was not a
Mhm.
common division or department within municipal governments. Whereas now you see it, there's a lot more of them. So not only was I like starting up a new position, but I also was a young female entering it. So I was a 29-year-old, you know, wife. I didn't know at the time that I was also going to be a mom soon. So I was that and starting that in a very male dominated world. And local government is also it's changing, which I'm thankful for, but
Mhm.
it's also a very traditional. This is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we're going to continue doing it. So as a 29-year-old woman joining that space, I was like, oh gosh, okay. So, part of my work was like just trying to build those bridges,
Yeah.
just trying to show, like, look, sustainability doesn't have to be this crazy out of left field idea. It can really just be common sense that's putting good governance
Mhm.
into process and play. And so, in doing that with the office, we not only got to do energy efficiency improvements within the city of Columbia's facilities. But we also then got to talk about how is energy used in our city. So we
Mhm.
participated in something called the Georgetown University Energy Prize, which ended up being like, I felt like a pyramid scheme. It was really a weird competition to be a part of, but it was for college towns under a certain population that wanted to kind of engage their community in thinking about how energy was used.
Mhm.
So we did the research and the data to show how energy was used across the community, and we're able to show that in some of our neighborhoods, a smaller home was using more energy or had a higher energy use intensity than some of our older housing that might have been bigger. And so
Mhm.
we're able to kind of use that as an education piece to communicate to people the importance of like building codes and energy efficiency improvements, and then also like rebates and programs that are available from our local utility. Um,
Mhm.
so starting, we try to lead by example at the city and then do those community programs. And then I would say the biggest one that you mentioned is our climate action and adaptation plan, which was a 2-year process. It started first in 2017, where our mayor at the time, Mayor Treese, said, "Okay, hold on. Even though President Trump is going to pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord, we're still in." And like a
Mhm.
lot of other cities, we then took the call to action and we set emission reduction goals. And I was the staff leading the charge on creating the climate action adaptation plan, which had a task force. We had internal and external community groups. We had so many meetings. Gosh, so many meetings. So many community events, online surveys, in-person surveys, all the stuff to develop basically Columbia's roadmap for how are we both going to prepare for an already changing climate, but also what can we do to reduce our own emissions so that we're not contributing to global climate change.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you mentioned education. I think that is so important in the realm of energy efficiency, especially because everyone thinks it's going to be a huge, non-feasible thing, but it really doing small things can really add up.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and so what does like community sustainability mean to you?
So I think for me, it means that we're thinking about like the needs of our current population, but not at the debt to future populations,
Mhm.
right? Our future generations. As I mentioned, I'm a mom. I have 2 little buffaloes, and I think about community sustainability is that I'm helping make a difference so that my Columbia is still around for them when they're
Mhm.
parents. And so community sustainability is working with your local community, like right now, making sure that the decisions you're making are not harming them. So you're thinking about how are we having energy efficiency improvements? How are we thinking about how stormwater is organized, or what do we do for trash and recycling? Um, but that you're doing it also with that vision for the future, so that somebody else later on isn't going to have to pay for it.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that's a super important mindset that we should all try to have in these times. Um, but so, what is your experience? And you kind of touched on this, but then, like, as a female in this industry.
Well, I mean, it's different. So, sustainability, I think, as a whole, is actually a very female-dominated
Hmm.
space. Because I can't help but assume it's just because that's kind of our skill set, right? You have to be good at multitasking because it's
Right.
sustainability is a broad topic,
Right.
and also you need to be like more of caring and nurturing and thinking about the impacts locally and globally. So that's just kind of already a female-dominated space.
Hmm.
But then when we talk about it in local government, while we're seeing a lot more female leadership, it's still very much a white male dominated environment. And so,
Right.
being a female, especially in sustainability, which can still be considered fringe in some parts,
Hmm.
um, you have to work harder. You have to work harder to justify your existence. You need to work harder to build bridges with some of those traditional, existing structures and systems. And then you have to also make sure you're holding space for other voices, because
Hmm.
while it is this male dominated space, I still have to recognize my own lived experience is that of a white woman,
Hmm.
who had parents who went to college. And so I'm already set up with a different lived experience than
Hmm.
our frontline communities that are experiencing climate change and just, social justice issues at a much more strenuous place than I did. And
Hmm.
so holding space for those voices and making sure to consider the impacts of decisions made today on them right now, as well as in the future generations.
Yeah, I think that perspective is also super important, and I commend you for that. Um, so kind of wrapping up, like if you have any advice, maybe you kind of touched on this too, but to any future female sustainability professionals, what would it be?
I think building relationships and networks is key,
Yeah.
right? So becoming involved in local groups that work in the space and like national groups or international groups that work in the space.
Hmm.
There's definitely ones that are for more women focused, but then also just there's usually like women affinity groups within larger organizations. So
Hmm.
as you're, becoming involved in that, those connections are going to be key because that might be a future person who tells you about a job opportunity, or it's a peer. Like I serve on the board of directors for the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, and it's a
Hmm.
peer network exchange where you're talking to other sustainability professionals in other cities, and it's a safe space, right, to share like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm struggling. I have these
Yeah.
expectations and these goals for what we're going to do, and I have no idea how to get there.
Yeah.
And within a lot of those organizations, there's then like affinity groups of, your like others that are going through the same experiences as you that you can really like learn and grow together. So I
Hmm.
really encourage that. And the other thing I would say is that in your local community, even getting involved with something that's not necessarily in sustainability, like let's say the local Chamber of Commerce Women's Network, that's
Hmm.
another space for women empowerment and like women supporting women. And so making those connections, then when you are coming out there, let's say you're with a company that's proposing a huge solar field or something, right? You already have connections for people to champion for you.
Right. Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Community is definitely important, not just in the sustainability field, but in any field, as
yeah,
you mentioned.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
Well, I think there's one more thing,
Okay.
so last week or 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago was International Women's Day.
Hmm.
And so we actually had an event for my campaign where it was like, women leaders through the years who came up in support of my campaign. And one of the things that was most interesting about this discussion was that, women have been fighting for equal pay and like, working environments that are supportive of
Right.
being, you know, a mother, a wife, or just a human.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to never, don't forget that. Don't forget that it hasn't been that long before, women had the right to vote. And like the Fair Pay Act, was that in the 70s, 60s, or 70s? And women
Hmm.
still make less than men on average.
Yeah.
So I encourage women to advocate for themselves. And, if you're a manager or you're a hiring manager or whatever, to make sure that you're advocating for equal pay and equal representation. So I think that'll be key for our future.
Yeah, that is also great advice. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed speaking with you, and make sure to check out all of our weekly Women in Sustainability conversations this month.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Natalie. It was a pleasure.